Now, I missed last week's episode of Garo. I was sick and I just didn't want to make as many reviews as I typically do on Friday, and I know a lot of people are saying, like, that was the best episode of Garo, which I agree with, but I've been pretty much under the impression that each week of Garo has gotten progressively better. Just last week's episode was pretty much moving the main plot around, and this episode just carries on with it. But last week's episode with the whole sister death, it was unexpected in some ways, but it definitely felt like she raised some death flags throughout that episode. Just how everything is connecting in this episode. There was a lot that was happening. Like, even though this was a primarily action-focused episode, there was still a lot of story and character progression. I mean, mainly seeing how just shook Sophie is for obvious reasons. The girl, even though she may not have had the best relationship with this sister, obviously seeing what happened to her and how she died fighting for her, and seemingly she's going to be blaming herself because this guy is coming after her because apparently the king wants her, which leads me to believe, is the king possibly her brother, or is the brother working for the king and that's why she wants, like, there's so many ways that they can take that and I'm interested in seeing it, but of course she's going to blame herself. It's going to make for her character to be even more intriguing than she already is. But to see the stuff with Luke, like, I think Luke's action scenes might be my favorite in the show because it's so interesting with his fighting style, especially when he gets into, like, almost hand-to-hand combat, but he's still using his pistols. It's so interesting how they do the battle choreography. It just makes it feel so fluid, especially when he's going up against someone who is basically a blade wielder, and how the camera was kind of shaking and moving around. That just looked amazing. This guy's had a bad life. Like, you can understand some of Luke's kind of, like, taking a step back from people based on what happened into his past. But it's pretty interesting, though, I have to say, with Sword's fight, because I've very much grown accustomed to the CG Garo suits and those types of fights. Back in the first series, I was a little kind of like, not fond of it for a little bit, but then I just grew accustomed to it, and now I kind of expect that when they go into their armor, that it's going to be that CG models, and even though they're not maybe as refined as some drawings, I think a lot of what they do with those fights, because they are not just 2D drawn, they can do a lot more cool things with it, even if it does take a little bit down from the quality of it. And that entire fight between Sword as well as the Dark Knight, holy, was that entertaining, and you could also feel the emotion, even though you couldn't really see Sword's facial expressions for the most part because of his armor. You really got a sense of pain, even throwing in a bit of backstory for Sword quickly. It was only there for a brief moment, but like with Luke's stuff, you see Sword definitely lost his family there in a fire at one of the schools there, so you can understand his path of, like, really using his abilities to save people, and then you have this other guy saying if you just abandon those ideals, you can have all this power. But like Sword says, like, what's the point of having that power if you can't use it to save people? And I think that's what makes Sword such a likable character, because even though he may have some perverted sides to him, he's such a noble hero, and it's someone you want to root for. So to see that pain and how much he was trying to take him out, I think he's going to be a good kind of antagonist for Sword this season. But it's just interesting. I feel like these past couple of episodes, I know a lot of people think like, oh, if we just have episodic, if we're not constantly moving the plot around, it's not as interesting. But the great thing about a series like Garo, which is going to have 24 episodes, I think it's 24, I just find it's interesting because you don't need to keep moving the plot forward every single episode. You can have the side stuff of just Monster of the Week. It's all about just these characters and how they kind of like interact with this world, but I did really enjoy the past couple of episodes because you're getting a bit more, because the question last week was, is El Dorado an organization or is it a place? And it definitely feels like it's a place. After this episode, maybe it is an organization and a place all in one, but it definitely feels like there's a king of this place slash organization, and this is like, for whatever reason, they keep taking people. It feels like it's almost like a horror hub, like this is where you feed on innocent humans and turn them into horrors and make a giant horror army. That's the road I feel like they're going with El Dorado, and who knows what happened to Sophie's brother, because is Sophie's brother El Dorado the king of this? Like, who knows where they're gonna ultimately go with this, but I thought just the past couple episodes, they had the action, they had the emotion, and I felt like they actually developed a lot of these characters and fleshed out their backstories very well, especially with this week being a primarily action-focused episode. They did a fantastic job at balancing the entire system here, and I can't wait to see more. But let me know your thoughts. What are you thinking about everything that went down, and what was your favorite fight? Did you prefer the Sword fight versus the Dark Knight, or did you actually prefer Luke's fight in this episode? Let me know your thoughts, and before you leave, smack that like button to show your support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.